Chapter 1528. Li Shang didn't know what method Lu Yi had to deal with the soul-devouring aphids, but once this kind of strange insect entered the soul sea, it would rapidly reproduce, and what awaited Lu Yi was the exhaustion of his divine sea and the loss of his soul force. In fact, the number of soul-devouring aphids that invaded her body just now wasn't too many, but in just a short while, they had already reproduced into a small group, which showed how strange they were. Lu Yi, however, acted as if he hadn't heard her and just stared at the group of soul-devouring aphids that had rushed into his soul sea. He was still thinking about how to safely and effectively solve Li Shang's problem, but these little insects ran out on their own, saving him a lot of trouble. When the soul-devouring aphids entered his soul sea, Lu Yi immediately felt a heart-wrenching pain. It was the feeling of his soul being torn apart. Under his perception, he could clearly perceive that the soul-devouring aphids were frantically gnawing at the power in his divine sea and quickly dividing into more individuals. In just a short while, the number of soul-devouring aphids had doubled. This thing was indeed very strange. Lu Yi wanted to observe more, but the pain from his soul was really unbearable, so he could only urge the power of his talent tree. In an instant, a strange flame appeared in his divine sea, enveloping all the soul-devouring aphids within it. Enveloped by the flame, the soul-devouring aphids were completely annihilated. Li Shang, who was anxious but didn't know what to do, couldn't help staring blankly at the inexplicable flame, vaguely feeling the great threat it brought to her, thinking about how she had actually launched a soul battle against Lu Yi and wanted him to set her free. Li Shang felt a little scared. Fortunately, Lu Yi never had any intention of killing her, otherwise, when this flame appeared, she would have already suffered the same fate as the soul-devouring aphids. "Are you all right?" Li Shang asked worriedly. "I'm fine," Lu Yi shook his head. His soul was slightly damaged, but he could just refine a soul-refining grass later to make up for it. "Li Tai Bai, can I stay here?" Li Shang asked embarrassedly. She was not timid and her will was very strong, but the soul-devouring aphids were really the nemesis of the soul race. Since there were soul-devouring aphids in the Mist Dragon, she didn't dare to wander around outside. Previously, the soul-devouring aphids only attacked her and not Lu Yi because they were attracted to her soul. Lu Yi noticed her fear and was secretly amused, but he still replied, "Of course." He flashed out of the deity sea and continued forward with a torch in hand. He couldn't help but feel a little strange. The star map given by the reincarnation tree clearly indicated that there was no special danger inside the Mist Dragon. The only danger here was the Mist Dragon itself. How could there be something like the soul-devouring aphids? Yes. After walking for a while, another corpse appeared in the light of the torches. Lu Yi wasn't surprised, but when he looked at the corpse, he couldn't help but be startled. Of Yi with soul? Yi of soul. Soul of soul, aphids, of. Taking a closer look, Yang Kai found that the child's body was chubby and she wore a jade bracelet on her lotus root-like wrist. Just as Lu Yi was sizing her up, he suddenly noticed a mass of black mist rising from the child's body and rushing straight towards him. The black mist gave him a familiar feeling. Instinctively, Lu Yi urged his spirit chi to protect himself, but the black mist simply ignored his spirit chi protection and poured directly into his body before disappearing. The next moment, Li Shang's exclamation came from his divine sea, "Li Tai Bai, there are more soul-devouring aphids." Lu Yi hurriedly manifested his soul avatar and saw a mass of black mist condensed from soul-devouring aphids in his divine sea. Without any hesitation, he immediately urged the power of his talent tree to burn this small mass of aphids. Li Shang's face was filled with fear. Why are there more soul-devouring aphids? She thought she would be safe hiding here, but who would have thought she would be so frightened that her face turned pale? "I think I found the source," Lu Yi said, his mind returning to his senses as he looked at the chubby corpse in front of him. If he wasn't mistaken, the source of the soul-devouring aphids was here. This little girl should have been attacked by the soul-devouring aphids and mistakenly entered the Mist Dragon, becoming trapped here. Although the little girl was dead, the soul-devouring aphids were still alive. No wonder soul-devouring aphids appeared in this place. They really were foreign. Lu Yi looked at the little girl's corpse and sighed slightly. No matter what the little girl's true identity was, she still looked like a child. It was really pitiful for her to die in such a place. He raised his hand and grabbed her arm, preparing to collect her along with the several corpses he had encountered before, then find a place to bury her later. But the moment he touched her, Lu Yi felt something was wrong. Squeezing it a little, he found that the lotus root-like arm was still flexible. Although it was cold, it was not the kind of touch a corpse should have. Slightly startled, Yang Kai carefully felt it, and in the next moment his face filled with shock. This little girl was actually still alive. It was just that her vitality was extremely weak, like a candle in the wind and rain, about to be extinguished at any time. Lu Yi couldn't help but hesitate. If the other party was a corpse, there was naturally nothing to say. He would just collect the corpse and find a place to bury it, but she still had a little vitality. Through the hazy white cocoon, he could vaguely make out a small figure curled up inside. If he wasn't mistaken, the one inside this white cocoon should be the little girl's soul avatar. Yang Kai didn't know whether this white cocoon was a soul artifact or a soul secret technique, but no matter what it was, being able to persist under the encirclement of the endless soul-devouring aphids was obviously no trivial matter. Gently knocking on the white cocoon, the figure inside did not respond, so Lu Yi had no choice but to withdraw for the time being. Li Shang's voice rang out in his mind, "Li Tai Bai, what's the situation now?" Lu Yi briefly explained what had happened to him before Li Shang emerged from his divine sea and stared blankly at the little figure in front of him who seemed to be sleeping soundly, a look of surprise on his face as he asked, "Do you know what her cultivation is?" Lu Yi shook his head, "I don't know." The other party's physique didn't seem to be strong, seemingly not even reaching the star constellation realm, but if she could survive in the starry sky, how could she not be a star constellation realm cultivator? Her divine sea had dried up, so it was impossible to infer her cultivation from the situation of her divine sea. "What should we do now?" Li Shang asked. Lu Yi also wanted to know what to do now. He thought he was just going to collect a corpse, but it turned out to be a living person. Unfortunately, he didn't know what her cultivation and temperament were like, which inevitably gave him a headache. Now that the vitality of her body was slowly recovering and the soul-devouring aphids in her divine sea had all been dealt with, there should be no problem for her to survive. It was just that her soul had suffered heavy damage and he didn't know when she would wake up. After hesitating for a while, Lu Yi said, "Let's take her with us." Since he had already saved her, he couldn't just leave her be, so he might as well save her to the end. Perhaps he could even form a good karma. Li Shang nodded, took a step forward, and picked up the little figure. Lu Yi held the torch and continued forward, followed by Li Shang. After walking for a few more days, the fog in front of them suddenly cleared and endless starlight shone into their field of vision. Lu Yi was overjoyed. They had finally made it out. End of this chapter. What shocked Lu Yi even more was that under his silent perception, he could actually sense an extremely terrifying and restrained power from this silver coin. The terror of that power was at a level that he couldn't even touch. This copper coin was found in the body of the armadillo beast. At that time, Lu Yi felt that the armadillo beast was able to stimulate the strange copper light. It was the power released by this copper coin. However, when he poured his spiritual power into it, there was no response, so he and Li Shang speculated that this thing was a rare treasure that could only be used once. But from the looks of it now, that didn't seem to be the case. This thing was not a rare treasure, but a true treasure. However, if one wanted to activate it, they would have to pay a special price. Lu Yi could feel that he could fully activate its power, but if it was really as he speculated, the price would be too great. After thinking about it, Lu Yi took out a spirit jade from his space and placed it on the silver coin. A scene that surprised Lu Yi and Li Shang appeared. They saw the silver light flowing on the silver coin, wrapping the spirit jade, and then the spirit jade turned into a stream of light and was completely swallowed by the silver coin. Li Shang was stunned. "What's going on?" Lu Yi shook his head. "I don't know." The only thing he knew was that this copper coin was definitely an incredible treasure. The 3 million spirit jades that disappeared were all swallowed by the copper coin like this. But if things were really as Lu Yi guessed, then the price of 3 million spirit jades was definitely worth it. The armadillo beast spat out a copper light, and under the suppression of the copper light, Lu Yi, who was at the late stage of the constellation realm, felt like he was carrying a heavy mountain. If it weren't for the spirit array that was arranged in advance, the situation would have been very awkward. But now that the copper coin had turned into a silver coin, if it was activated, then the silver light it shot out would definitely be more powerful than the copper coin. Lu Yi wanted to test the power of the silver coin, but when he remembered that it was 3 million spirit jades, he could only give up. Even with his wealth, he couldn't afford to try it. If 3 million spirit jades could turn a copper coin into a silver coin, then what about 30 million or 300 million spirit jades? Lu Ye's mind was full of imagination, but he really didn't have the ability to test it out. After putting away the silver coin with its terrifying power, Lu Yi activated the star boat and flew into the depths of the starry sky. According to the star chart given to him by the reincarnation tree, he should have entered a barren area now. There were many galaxies in the starry sky, but their territories were not closely connected. Therefore, there were many barren areas like this in the starry sky. Generally, these areas were full of danger and didn't belong to any galaxy. Some barren areas were the territory of powerful constellation beasts, some were places where space wonders were located, and some even hid all kinds of undetectable dangers. Of course, there were also some barren areas that were so barren that they didn't even have a decent realm that could nurture life. The greatest danger in this barren area was that there were several space wonders. The Mist Dragon was only one of them, and it was also the least dangerous one. As the star boat sailed forward, Lu Yi kept checking the star chart in his hand to make sure that he didn't deviate from his course. Half a month later, a strange scene suddenly appeared in front of him. In the vast starry sky in front of him, there seemed to be a huge mirror that reflected the scenery in all directions. However, the mirror seemed to be broken, with crisscrossing cracks all over it. It looked extremely terrifying. Lu Ye's face lit up with joy, because seeing this thing meant that he was on the right track. It was a space wonder, the space-splitting mirror. The crisscrossing cracks on the mirror weren't cracks at all, but spatial rifts. Anyone who entered them wouldn't have a good ending. Standing on the star boat, Lu Yi looked at the space-splitting mirror. Even though he was far away from it, he could still feel the extremely mysterious energy fluctuations coming from it. If he was strong enough, he could definitely try to enter it to comprehend its mysteries. If he could survive, not to mention other things, his attainments in Void Spirit tattoos would definitely improve by several levels. Because Void Spirit tattoos corresponded to this kind of mysterious spatial power. When he and Tang Jun were trapped in the Tunnel of Worms, he had a very deep impression of it. Unfortunately, his strength was too low now, and he didn't dare to enter such a terrifying space wonder. He steered the star boat around the space-splitting mirror. The greatest danger of this space wonder wasn't the spatial rifts that could be seen with the naked eye, but the invisible ones. Affected by this space wonder, the starry sky within hundreds of millions of miles around it wasn't safe. No one knew if they would suddenly run into an undetectable spatial rift. If they were unlucky enough to run into one, if their fleshly body wasn't strong enough, they would die in an instant. The space-splitting mirror was extremely huge. Even with the starboat speed, it took Lu Yi a whole month to fly around it. During this time, he didn't see a single living being. Even the low-intelligence star beasts knew to stay away from this terrifying place. After bypassing the space-splitting mirror, it took Lu Yi a few more days to adjust his course and continue forward. At a certain moment, he suddenly turned his head and looked in a certain direction, where he saw a streak of light whizzing by in the distance. It seemed to be in a hurry. It was undoubtedly a cultivator, and judging from the spiritual power fluctuations, he was a late constellation realm cultivator. Lu Yi didn't know which galaxy he came from. Finally, he met a living person. Although the other party didn't seem to have any intention of coming over to greet him, Lu Yi finally felt a trace of vitality in this cold, starry sky. Although such a barren land was dangerous, it wasn't a place that no one cared about, because the amount of spirit jades produced here was large enough. Compared to competing with local cultivators in their own galaxies, searching for spirit jades in such a place would undoubtedly yield a greater harvest. However, those who dared to come to such a place were basically all skilled and daring people. Lu Yi felt that he had underestimated the courage of the cultivators in the nearby galaxies. After he bypassed the space-splitting mirror, he could see some cultivators passing by in a hurry from time to time. Some of them were alone, while others were in groups of 2 or 3. However, after a few days, he vaguely felt that something was wrong, because the liveliness of this barren land had exceeded his expectations. There were a total of 4 galaxies bordering this vast barren land, namely the Quiet Moon Galaxy, the Indefinite Galaxy, the Dark North Galaxy, and the Daluo Galaxy, all of which were marked on the star map. The cultivators coming and going didn't seem to be just looking for spirit jades, but also seemed to be looking for something. What surprised Lu Yi even more was that more than 80% of these cultivators were weapon cultivators. This was because, without exception, they all carried their own weapons with them. This was actually a very strange thing. Lu Yi was used to carrying the Panshan saber around his waist so that he could draw it at any time when he encountered an enemy. However, in fact, many cultivators, including weapon cultivators, would keep their weapons in their storage rings so that it wouldn't affect their use in a fight. In particular, some weapon cultivators had extremely large weapons that were inconvenient to carry around. However, the weapon cultivators he met recently, no matter what kind of weapon they carried, were all exposed, and when they flew, they would activate the power of their weapons from time to time. Moreover, very few cultivators flew with the help of starboats. They all flew with their bodies. Lu Yi vaguely felt that something must have happened in this area, but after all, he was just passing by, so he didn't pay much attention to it. However, he didn't expect that one day, a cultivator would directly fly over after discovering him and shoot a stream of light at him from afar. End of chapter. Chapter 1530. Lu Yi didn't know which galaxy that cultivator was from, so he naturally didn't recognize him. The light beam that the other party shot out wasn't dangerous. It was just a jade slip. Lu Yi reached out and grabbed it. Just as he was about to ask what was going on, the other party flew away without saying a word, not giving Lu Yi any chance to talk. He frowned and immersed his divine sense into the jade slip to check, but there was only one message inside. 1 month later, at the Heavenly Dog Planet, the treasure will belong to the Fated One. There was a signature at the end of the message. Lu Yi looked at it and found that the person who signed it was called Shensi Luo. The name was strange, and he didn't know if it was a title or a real name. The message was very simple. It seemed to summon him to a place 1 month later, outside of the Heavenly Dog Planet. Lu Yi wasn't a cultivator from the nearby galaxies, so he didn't know where the Heavenly Dog Planet was. Moreover, he didn't want to get involved in this matter. He had only covered 20% of his journey, so he didn't have time to get involved in other things. The person who passed the message to him probably mistook him for a cultivator from the nearby galaxies. The other party didn't know that he had come from the Myriad Phenomenon Galaxy. After putting away the jade slip, Lu Yi continued to rush forward leisurely. However, a few days later, he found something interesting. Many cultivators who passed by were actually heading in the same direction as him. Moreover, the cultivators he met this time were all driving starboats. They were heading in a clear direction and didn't travel with their physical bodies. The little girl he rescued from the Mist Dragon was still unconscious. Li Shang was taking care of her, so Lu Yi didn't have to worry about her. On this day, Lu Yi saw a battle in front of him from afar. This kind of battle wasn't uncommon in this barren area. Lu Yi had encountered some battles between cultivators before, and they were extremely lively. However, the scene wasn't big, and they were basically one-on-one battles. After all, cultivators from 4 galaxies had come here, so it was impossible for them to coexist peacefully. The situation this time seemed to be different. Lu Yi looked forward and saw a fierce battle. 2 cultivators were besieged by a group of star beasts. He didn't know what the 2 cultivators had done to be so unlucky. Judging from the fluctuations of their spiritual power, one was at the late stage of the constellation realm, and the other was at the early stage of the constellation realm. Beside them was a corpse that couldn't be more dead. There were 5 or 6 star beasts besieging them, and they looked like a group of hyenas. Although they were star beasts, their attacks were quite methodical, and the 2 cultivators were in a more difficult situation. Lu Yi looked off into the distance. Suddenly, his brow arched as he stared at the early constellation cultivator. A look of surprise appeared on his face, because he realized that he actually knew this person. Even if it was someone he didn't know, Lu Yi wouldn't mind lending a helping hand and forming a good karma, let alone someone he knew. Just as he steered the spirit ship and sped over, he saw the late-stage constellation realm cultivator suddenly throw out a spirit talisman. Taking advantage of the instant the spirit talisman's power erupted and forced the hyenas back, he leaped out of the battle circle and quickly fled into the distance. He abandoned his companion at the early stage of the constellation realm. He was already in a precarious situation. Now that his companion at the late stage of the constellation realm had left, there was no way for him to survive. A group of star beasts gathered from all directions and opened their bloody mouths to end the cultivator's life. Right at this moment, a streak of silver light shot over and directly knocked away a star beast that was pouncing towards the cultivator. Not only did the powerful impact cause the star boat to shake violently, but the star beast was also split into 2 halves, blood spraying everywhere. The silver light brushed past the cultivator's body and rushed out without losing momentum. A figure jumped out from the silver light. There was a faint sound of a saber, and then saber lights flashed all over the sky. The early stage of the constellation realm didn't realize what had happened. He only knew that a big hand had grabbed his shoulder. Under the guidance of the big hand, he narrowly avoided the star beast's attacks. Once, the hyena's fangs were even an inch away from his neck, making him break out in a cold sweat. By the time he came back to his senses, the arrogant hyena star beasts were all dead. His face was still in shock. He didn't expect that he would still be alive. He finally realized that someone had saved him at the critical moment. Turning his head, he saw a familiar face looking at him with a smile. The cultivator couldn't help but be stunned. He obviously didn't expect to meet Lu Yi here. He was overjoyed. "Brother Lu." "It's been a long time, Brother Du Lang." Lu Yi looked at him with a smile and slowly returned the Pan Mountain saber to its sheath. The person in front of him was Du Lang, whom he met in the Alpha Origin realm. Back then, when he participated in the battle for the Spirit Sea of the Reincarnation Tree, he got to know a group of young cultivators from various realms, but basically, he didn't have too deep of an interaction with them. Only Du Lang and Yu Yaorao stayed with each other for a period of time. The first bucket of gold he dug up in the Alpha Origin realm was thanks to Du Lang. At that time, Du Lang gave him some jade-eating ants, which allowed him to mine the spirit jade lode. Unfortunately, after so many years, Lu Yi didn't take care of those jade-eating ants, and those little things had long starved to death. After parting ways with the spirit jade lode, Lu Yi continued to participate in the battle for the Spirit Sea, but Du Lang withdrew early because he knew that he wasn't strong enough to win. He simply didn't want to take the risk. Lu Yi only knew that Du Lang came from a domain called the Qi Sky Continent, but he didn't know which galaxy this domain was located in. He didn't expect to meet him here. In other words, the Qi Sky Continent was located in one of the 4 nearby galaxies. In this vast starry sky, to be able to meet again after parting ways was also a kind of fate. "You, how did you reach the advanced constellation realm?" Du Lang couldn't believe his eyes. Everyone was clearly only at the Spirit Sea back then. Even though Lu Yi had taken first place, it had only been a few years, but he had already reached the advanced constellation realm, leaving him far behind in terms of cultivation. It was really unbelievable. "I was lucky and encountered some good opportunities." Du Lang naturally knew that it wasn't just a matter of opportunities, but he also instinctively asked in shock. After realizing that something was wrong, he didn't ask any further and said with a surprised expression, "Brother Lu is really amazing." I could tell that Brother Lu wasn't an ordinary person during the battle for the Spirit Sea back then. Looking at it now, I, Du Lang, still have good eyesight. "Who was that just now?" Lu Yi asked. Du Lang should have teamed up with him, but at the critical moment, that person actually abandoned Du Lang and fled alone without even saying goodbye. It was really too much. "Sigh, It's a long story. Du Lang sighed and turned to look at the corpse at the side. His expression was gloomy, and he bowed to the torn corpse. Only then did he put the corpse away with red eyes. It could be seen that this dead cultivator was related to Du Lang in some way. They might have been fellow disciples. Seeing that Lu Yi had no intention of dealing with the star beast corpses, Du Lang said, "Brother Lu, if you don't mind, can I take these corpses away?" "Do as you wish." Lu Yi nodded. The star beast corpses were actually quite valuable, especially their crystal cores. However, Lu Yi had experienced great wealth and didn't care much about these things. Du Lang put away the star beast corpses and boarded the star boat under Lu Ye's beckoning. After all, the star boat was only used for traveling. Fortunately, the star boat Lu Yi bought was of good quality, so it wasn't damaged even after the shocking collision. When he saw Li Shang, who was taking care of the unconscious little girl, Du Lang bowed and said, "Greetings, sister-in-law." Qi Kong Du Lang greets sister-in-law. He couldn't be blamed for having such a misunderstanding. It was just that Lu Yi and the other two looked too much like a family of three. When Du Lang greeted them, he muttered in his heart, "I haven't seen Brother Lu for a few years, and his children are already so big. How capable!" Li Shang couldn't help but blush when he heard that. However, he didn't explain and just glanced at Lu Yi. Lu Yi quickly said, "Brother Du Lang, you misunderstood. This is fellow Taoist Li Shang." Du Lang looked embarrassed and bowed again. "Fellow Taoist Li Shang, please forgive me. I was too impulsive." Li Shang still didn't say a word. Obviously, he had no intention of blaming Du Lang. "Which way are we going?" Lu Yi asked. Although he couldn't wait to go home, it was rare for him to meet an acquaintance here. It wasn't a problem for him to send Du Lang off. Du Lang's reaction was a little strange. "Brother Lu, don't you need to snatch treasures?" "Snatch what treasures?" Lu Yi was confused. However, he quickly recalled the jade slip he received from Shenxi Luo a few days ago. It said that treasures were for the fated ones. He guessed that the snatching treasures mentioned by Du Lang should be the same thing mentioned in the jade slip. "Brother Lu, you don't know?" Du Lang was surprised and frowned. "Brother Lu, since you appeared here, I thought you were here to snatch treasures. Which galaxy are you from?" "I'm from Jade Conch Galaxy, not the nearby galaxies." "Jade Conch?" Du Lang thought for a while and shook his head. "Never heard of it." After all, he was only an early-stage constellation realm cultivator. Moreover, it hadn't been long since he became a constellation realm cultivator. How would he know about Jade Conch? However, if Lu Yi was from Jade Conch Galaxy, why would he appear here? Du Lang couldn't understand. "Which galaxy are you from?" Lu Yi asked. Du Lang said, "Our Qikong continent is located in Indefinite Galaxy." Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. What a coincidence. He was going to cross the entire Indefinite Galaxy. According to the star chart given to him by the reincarnation tree, if he wanted to return to the 9 states from the Wanxiang Sea, he had to pass through 2 galaxies. One was Changyun, and the other was Indefinite. In this way, sending Du Lang back was a matter of convenience. He was still worried that an outsider like him passing through the Indefinite Galaxy would cause some trouble. After all, there was a high probability that the cultivators in this galaxy had the means to identify each other. If others treated him as a bad guy, it would be hard to explain. If he was going to pass through Indefinite Galaxy alone, it wouldn't be a problem to be careful. However, in the future, he would have to bring people from the 9 states. That would be an entire fleet of ships. It was difficult to guarantee that it wouldn't cause misunderstandings. If he could communicate with the experts of Indefinite Galaxy in advance through Du Lang, these unnecessary troubles could be avoided. End of chapter. Chapter 1531. Lu Yi was actually a little confident in this matter. He did not intend to hide anything from the experts of the Indefinite Galaxy. As long as he could meet the experts of the Indefinite Galaxy and explain to them about the Wanxiang Sea, he believed that they would be happy to participate. No one could resist the temptation of the Wanxiang Sea. It could almost be said to be the center of the entire starry sky. Who would not want to connect with such a place? But this way, he would have to bring people from the Qinglidao world and the Yulua world along the way, as well as the people of the indefinite galaxy when he arrived here. The scale of the fleet would definitely be incomparably large. If he entered the Changyun galaxy again, he did not know if he would arouse the hostility of others. He could only take one step at a time. Lu Yi could not predict what would happen in a few years, but there would always be a way. Collecting his thoughts, Lu Yi asked, "Brother Dou Lang, what is the status of the Qi Sky continent in the indefinite galaxy? Are there any sunshine experts in your world?" If there was sunshine in the Qi Sky continent, then things would be much easier. Dou Lang shook his head and smiled bitterly. If there was sunshine in the Qi Sky continent, we would not have fallen into this situation today. What do you mean? Lu Yi frowned. It seemed that Dou Lang was not living very well. Dou Lang sighed. "Brother Lu, do you remember what I told you about this domain?" Only then did Lu Yi remember that when he was mining with Dou Lang did mention the problem of the Qi Sky continent. The foundation of the Qi Sky continent was fading, and the domain was weakening. Therefore, he had no other goals in the Alpha origin stage, and only wanted to mine some spirit jade to see if it could delay the weakening of the Qi Sky continent. In the starry sky, there were countless domains. Some were thriving like newborn babies, while others were old and dying like the sun in the west. The 9 prefectures were thriving domains, while the Qi Sky continent was an existence that was completely opposite. The weakening of a domain's foundation would cause many problems, and the group that would be affected the most was the group of cultivators. Within a domain, the upper limit of a cultivator's cultivation was directly related to the strength of the domain's foundation. The Qi Sky continent was once a tyrant. Although it was not at the level of a top domain, it was one of the most powerful domains in the indefinite galaxy. There were often 3 to 5 sunshine experts in the domain. However, as the foundation of the realm weakened and the Sunshine Realm cultivators died of old age, the cultivation of the Qi Kong Realm cultivators was gradually affected. Especially in the last 1,000 years, Qi Kong's foundation had weakened greatly. Now, the domain could no longer produce spiritual light and allow the deity C to advance to a constellation. If this continued, Qi Kong's level would continue to drop. Under the slow evolution, the highest level of the cultivators in the domain would continue to be suppressed until there was no spiritual qi of heaven and earth in the domain, making it unsuitable for cultivation. Of course, this weakening would last for many years, and the lives of mortals would not be affected too much. There wasn't a single Rizhao in the Crimson Skies, and only a handful of Yu Yao. It was difficult for a new constellation to be born. This was like the end of the world for the cultivators of the Crimson Skies. In order to find a way out, Red Sky could only rely on the strongest realm in the galaxy, which was the Unbounded Realm, in exchange for some cultivators to be promoted to the Constellation Realm. This was because the realm could no longer allow cultivators to advance from the deity C to the Constellation Realm. They could only send those who were qualified to advance to the Unbounded Realm to be nurtured. However, there weren't many of these places. Every year, only 3 people could be sent from the Crimson Skies continent to the Unbounded Realm. Whether these 3 people could successfully advance to the Constellation Realm was still unknown. Sometimes, if they were lucky, 1 or 2 of them would advance. Sometimes, if they were unlucky, none of them would advance. For this, Qi Kong had paid a huge price. It could be said that the cultivators of the Crimson Skies continent were living under the Unbounded Realm's roof, acting according to their wishes. This time, Du Lang had joined forces with a senior brother from the Crimson Skies continent for 2 reasons. First, to search for spiritual jade to cultivate. Second, to seek an opportunity. However, they met an unbounded cultivator named Su Dingyang here. It was the late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator who abandoned him and ran away on his own. Du Lang and his senior brother were forcefully recruited by Su Dingyang. The 2 brothers had no choice but to follow him. In the end, they encountered a group of constellation beasts. They were no match for them, and their senior brother died on the spot. Su Dingyang escaped without a trace. If it weren't for Lu Ye's sudden appearance, Du Lang would have died long ago. Lu Ye couldn't help but sigh. I see that this place is a mix of good and bad. Cultivators from all 4 galaxies coexist. If you want to search for spiritual jade, you don't have to come here. Du Lang said, we didn't want to come here either. It's just that the Crimson Skies continent is in decline, and there are cultivators from other realms everywhere. It's extremely difficult to find spiritual jade, so we could only come here to try our luck. Generally speaking, the nearby skies of a realm were where cultivators from the Crimson Skies continent searched for spiritual jade. Cultivators from other realms wouldn't easily enter, otherwise, it would be considered a provocation. However, the Crimson Skies continent's power was too weak now, and they were living under someone else's roof. How could cultivators from other realms care about the feelings of the Crimson Skies continent's cultivators? Even if spiritual jade could be produced near the Crimson Skies continent, it would all be collected by cultivators from other realms. Being forced to come here, Du Lang had no choice but to come here. After thinking about it, Du Lang said, "Moreover, we didn't come here just for spiritual jade. If we can get that opportunity, even if we can't keep it for ourselves, if we give it away, it will make the Crimson Skies continent's situation much better in the future." What kind of opportunity is it? Lu Yi heard Du Lang mention it several times. Even if he wasn't interested, he was still intrigued. But unexpectedly, Du Lang shook his head and said, "Actually, I don't know what kind of opportunity it is. It's just that since more than 100 years ago, several nearby galaxies began to spread that there was a great opportunity in this barren land. Since then, people have been exploring this place." Lu Yi couldn't help laughing. "You don't even know what kind of opportunity it is, and you actually came here. Aren't you afraid that the news is wrong? Moreover, it's been 100 years. Even if there really was an opportunity, I'm afraid it would have already been taken by others." Du Lang shook his head seriously. "The news can't be wrong. I've asked the elders in this world and they said that this is indeed true. Moreover, that opportunity has always been there and has never been taken by anyone." Lu Yi didn't think much of it. "Brother Du Lang, think about it. If there really is such a great opportunity, why don't those Yu Yao and Ri Zhao take action? The cultivators I've met recently are all constellations. There's no trace of Yu Yao or Ri Zhao at all." Du Lang explained, "I'm not too sure about the specific reason, but the Ri Zhao and Ri Zhao of the nearby galaxies seem to have reached an agreement 100 years ago. That is, Yu Yao and Ri Zhao are not allowed to enter this area except for the constellations. The opportunity here can only be fought over by the constellations of the 4 galaxies. That's why, Brother Lu, you can't see Yu Yao and Ri Zhao." Lu Yi couldn't help but frown. He felt that this matter was somewhat unreliable. Seeing this, Du Lang said, "Brother Lu, you're also a weapon cultivator. This opportunity is exclusive to weapon cultivators. Since you're here, why don't you give it a try? With Brother Lu's cultivation, you might have a chance." An opportunity that belongs to weapon cultivators? Lu Yi was astonished. Were there factions when it came to opportunities? However, on second thought, 80% of the cultivators he met recently were weapon cultivators. It was indeed a little strange. Moreover, Du Lang wasn't the only one looking for opportunities here. The cultivators of the 4 galaxies were all here. If the opportunity was fake, it didn't make sense for it to attract so many people. This opportunity, perhaps it really existed. Du Lang sighed. In the end, Qi Kong isn't strong enough. The others should know the truth of that opportunity. Unfortunately, Qi Kong, don't know. Otherwise, I could clear up Brother Lu's doubts." Lu Yi thought for a moment and asked, "Who is Luo Shenxi?" Du Lang said, "The overlord of the Daluo galaxy, the Daluo world, is a descendant of Ri Zhao. In the 4 galaxies, he can be said to be the strongest cultivator in the constellation realm. Brother Lu, have you received a message from Luo Shenxi?" Lu Yi nodded. "A few days ago, someone sent me a message asking me to go to some heavenly dog planet. We received it before. In fact, that opportunity has appeared several times in the past 100 years, but it has never been obtained. It seems that it has appeared again this time on Heavenly Dog Planet. Luo Shenxi must have found something, but unfortunately he can't solve it. That's why he gathered people. Brother Lu, if you're not in a hurry, you can go take a look." Seeing Lu Yi fall silent, Du Lang said, "Heavenly Dog Planet is just ahead. It won't take a detour." "It's on the way?" Lu Yi was surprised. "Then let's go take a look." Du Lang had also suffered some injuries in the previous battle, so he spent the rest of the time on the planetary ship recovering. Li Shang's voice suddenly entered Lu Ye's ears. "Fellow Taoist, should I call you Li Taibai? Or Lu Ye?" Previously, when she and Lu Yi were dealing with the trouble in the Blue Jade world, there was once a blood tribe constellation cultivator who called out Lu Ye's name. Although Li Shang found it a little strange, he didn't think much of it. It wasn't until Du Lang called him Brother Lu that she realized there was something wrong with the name Li Taibai. Lu Yi looked up at her and saw that she was looking at him with a faint smile. He didn't feel awkward at all and replied through voice transmission, "Names are just code names. Fellow Taoist, you can call me whatever you want. However, my real name is Lu Yi, and people call me Lu Ye. I can't help it. Li Taibai is just an alias." He also used to call him Yi Lu, Wuzuan. "Why do people call you Lu Ye?" Li Shang was a little confused. Lu Yi said, "In my hometown, there's a little thing that can test a cultivator's aptitude. A leaf with 64 leaves is the highest aptitude. When I was tested, I only had one leaf, so some immoral guy gave me the nickname of Ye. Just like that it spread out." Li Shang was stunned for a while before she suddenly covered her mouth and laughed. She looked like she was overjoyed. 64 leaves is the highest, and you only have one leaf? This was the biggest joke in the world. Although Li Shang hadn't seen many foreign cultivators, she was sure that no one in the constellation realm was a match for Lu Yi. After all, she had seen with her own eyes how Lu Yi moved unhindered among the blood tribe cultivators. If such a person only had one leaf, then there must be something wrong with the little thing that tested his aptitude. End of chapter. Chapter 1532. Li Shang smiled happily, but Lu Yi couldn't be bothered with her. But then again, this was the first time he had seen Li Shang smile after spending so much time with her. The planetary boat continued forward, passing by cultivators who were also rushing forward from time to time. From the looks of it, they were all people who had received Luo Shenxi's summons and were preparing to head to the heavenly dog planet. Lu Yi sensed the power of this star system because there were so many constellations in this barren area, let alone in their own star realm. He didn't know the exact location of the heavenly dog planet, but Do Lang did. Under Do Lang's guidance, they arrived at the heavenly dog planet in about 10 days. From afar, it looked like a desolate star, but its shape was a little special. It wasn't a spherical star that was commonly seen in the starry sky. From a certain angle, it looked like a huge dog lying in the starry sky. It didn't look much different from the hyenas that had attacked Do Lang before. Lu Yi guessed that this was probably the origin of the heavenly dog planet's name. He didn't approach the heavenly dog planet because many cultivators had stopped in the void outside the heavenly dog planet. There were at least 300 planetary boats of different shapes and sizes gathered here. It was quite a spectacular sight. There were even more cultivators on their way here. Because there were still some days before the time Luo Shenxi had mentioned, the cultivators here didn't take any substantial action even though they had gathered here. Lu Yi steered the planetary boat to a spacious spot and parked it, then looked around. In terms of the performance of the planetary ship, it was considered to be quite good in this place. However, Lu Yi had considered some problems when he bought the planetary ship. Therefore, judging from its appearance, it looked very plain and unadorned. It was hard to tell if it was good or bad, so it was not very eye-catching. Lu Yi vaguely sensed someone looking in his direction. He followed the gaze and saw that it was from the cultivator named Su Dingyang. He was clearly surprised to see that Do Lang was still alive, but he only glanced at him for a moment before looking away. At this moment, several figures had gathered around Su Dingyang. They seemed to be cultivators from the unbounded realm. Su Dingyang was a descendant of Rizhao, so his status in the unbounded realm should be quite high. "Which one is Luo Shenxi?" Lu Yi asked. Du Lang pointed in a direction and said, "That's him." Lu Yi looked in the direction he was pointing at, and saw an extremely handsome young man dressed in luxurious clothes standing on the deck of a planetary ship, chatting and laughing with the cultivators around him in a relaxed manner. Luo Shenxi, who was known as the strongest person in the four-way galaxy, did not have an overbearing temperament. Instead, he looked very gentle. That planetary ship should be his. The cultivators gathered around him all had pretty good cultivation bases. Most of them were at the late stage of the constellation realm. However, Lu Yi could tell that even though these cultivators were chatting and joking with Luo Shenxi, there was an almost imperceptible sense of restraint in their expressions. Luo Shenxi seemed to have sensed Lu Ye's gaze as he casually glanced over. His gaze paused on Lu Yi for a moment before he nodded slightly. Lu Yi nodded in return. However, to his surprise, Luo Shenxi actually flew out of his starboat and landed directly on Lu Ye's starboat. In the blink of an eye, he landed not far from Lu Yi. With a smile on his face, he said, "Fellow Taoist, you look somewhat unfamiliar. May I know which realm you are from?" Lu Yi did not even blink. "Red Sky." Luo Shenxi shook his head slowly. "No, there is no such person as you in Red Sky." Lu Yi said indifferently, "Fellow Taoist, you are from the Daluo realm, which is very far away from Red Sky. Do you know the cultivators of Red Sky like the back of your hand?" Before Luo Shenxi could react, a cultivator shouted, "Impudent! Just answer whatever young Master Luo asks. Don't talk nonsense." That cultivator was one of the cultivators who had gathered around Luo Shenxi and chatted with him. Lu Yi did not know where he came from, but from his attitude, it was obvious that he wanted to curry favor with Luo Shenxi. Luo Shenxi smiled gently. "Of course I can't know the cultivators of Red Sky like the back of my hand. I'm only interested in the strong. I basically know all the constellation realm cultivators in the four-way galaxy, but I've never seen you before." Lu Yi was puzzled. He was just standing there quietly and did not even activate his power. Why did Luo Shenxi think he was a strong cultivator? He continued to talk nonsense. "I'm in seclusion all year round and rarely go out." Luo Shenxi nodded. "That's more like it. Since you're here, I'll have to ask for your help later. This matter is not easy to solve." After a few simple words, Luo Shenxi quickly left. However, the information revealed by his previous words made many people secretly start to size up Lu Yi. Luo Shenxi was born with a pair of intellect and had a mysterious ability. Since he said that Lu Yi was a strong cultivator, there was an 80% chance that he was right. Unfortunately, no matter how they looked, they could not see anything special about Lu Yi. Time passed slowly, and people continued to arrive on planetary boats. By the time a month was up, the number of cultivators gathered here had exceeded 1,000, which showed how powerful the four-way galaxy was. The cultivators who came were the same as the ones Lu Yi had encountered before. 80% of them were weapon cultivators, and only a few were from other sections. However, they all came with the weapon cultivators, probably to assist the weapon cultivators around them. Luo Shenxi did not waste any time. He leaped out and said slowly, "Fellow cultivators, since you've answered my summons, you must be here for that opportunity. However, if you want to obtain that opportunity, there's a big problem ahead." He pointed at the heavenly dog planet behind him and continued, "I'm sure everyone is aware of the situation on the heavenly dog planet. It's a nest of star beasts. Not only are there countless constellation star beasts, but there are also 2 moon jade star beasts. Therefore, if you want to enter the heavenly dog planet, you'll have to work together and deal with those 2 moon jade star beasts first." If it were not for the 2 moon jade star beasts, Luo Shenxi would not have gathered so many cultivators. When he confirmed that the opportunity was on the heavenly dog planet, he would have led people to obtain it. However, it was precisely because of the 2 moon jade star beasts that Luo Shenxi had no choice but to gather people to deal with them. Someone shouted, "We were all gathered here by young Master Luo. Since that's the case, we'll do as you say, young Master Luo." Immediately, many people voiced their agreement. Those who came here were not idiots. Naturally, they knew that the current situation required a leader. The summons had been sent by Luo Shenxi, and he himself was known as the strongest constellation master in the four-way galaxy. It could be said that he was the only one qualified to take charge of these matters. If it were anyone else, it would be difficult to convince the masses. Luo Shenxi did not relent. "If that's the case, then I'll do my best. However, I'll make it clear first. Before we deal with those 2 moon jade star beasts, If anyone dares to back out at the last minute or wait for an opportunity to secretly attack the enemy, then you'll be my enemy. If that happens, then I, Luo Shenxi, will kill you even if you have to flee to the ends of the earth." Everyone voiced their agreement again, indicating that they would definitely follow his orders. Luo Shenxi immediately began to assign people. He clearly had a deep understanding of the cultivators in the four-way galaxy. Even if he did not know everyone, he knew the strength of many late-stage constellation masters. He named them one by one and assigned them various tasks. With so many people gathered together, it was actually not difficult to deal with the two moon jade star beasts. After all, there was strength in numbers. However, there were not only two moon jade star beasts on Heavenly Dog Planet. There were also many constellation star beasts. Just dealing with these constellation star beasts would require a lot of manpower. Luo Shenxi's arrangements were well organized. It was clear that he was very capable and had a very meticulous mind. Everyone obeyed his orders. Lu Yi did not receive any orders. Just as he was about to relax, he saw Luo Shenxi looking at him. "Fellow cultivator, when the time comes, please work with me to kill the moon jade star beasts." Lu Yi heard this and nodded slightly. "No problem." Seeing how calm he was, Luo Shenxi was even more certain that Lu Ye's strength was extraordinary. After all the arrangements were made, the operation began. More than a dozen teams flew toward Heavenly Dog Planet from different directions. Each team was led by a late-stage constellation master. The desolate planet's environment was extremely harsh. The sea of clouds below was tumbling, and sand was flying everywhere. The dozen teams of cultivators entered Heavenly Dog Planet and quickly disappeared. Even if Lu Yi used his full vision, he could not see what was going on inside. However, after a short while, those cultivators flew out from different directions. Behind them, a large number of star beasts were chasing after them. Those star beasts looked exactly like the hyena star beasts that Lu Yi had encountered before. It looked like this desolate planet was their nest. Most of the teams were being chased by constellation star beasts. There were many of them, and although they appeared to be in a sorry state, they were actually not in much danger. As these teams fled, they would turn around and counterattack, angering the star beasts and luring them into the encirclement that they had set up in advance. However, the cultivators in two of the teams were not in a good situation. This was because the two moon jade star beasts were chasing after these two teams. Judging from their auras, these were two mid-stage moon jade star beasts. Their bodies were also more than a dozen times larger than the average hyena star beast. They were truly ferocious beasts. As they fled, more and more unlucky cultivators were caught and bitten by the moon jade star beasts. No matter how the cultivators retaliated, they were unable to shake them off. Blood splattered across the sky. The terrifying auras of the moon jade star beasts made the constellation masters' scalps tingle. The cultivators in these two teams were unlucky to be chased by the moon jade star beasts. At this moment, Lu Yi was standing beside Luo Shenxi. He was calmly looking at the approaching moon jade star beast. Li Shang hadn't come with him. She was still on the star boat looking after the unconscious little girl. Therefore, she couldn't use Li Shang's soul for this battle. However, Lu Yi didn't need to deal with the moon jade star beast alone. Therefore, he wasn't too worried. If it weren't for the fact that there were so many people present, he would have liked to test the power of the silver coin. Although it had devoured 3 million spirit jades, there were some things that he wouldn't know the result of unless he tried. Those who had ambushed the moon jade star beast were all hiding in a concealment formation. This formation had been set up by a formation cultivator, so there was no need to worry about being discovered by the star beast. Moreover, star beasts generally had low intelligence. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been lured out so easily. End of chapter. Chapter 1533. In the blink of an eye, one of the groups of cultivators lured a moon jade star beast into the formation, and they all panicked. This group originally had more than a dozen people, but only 5 of them survived. The others were all killed by the moon jade star beast as they fled. Even late-stage constellation realm cultivators would find it difficult to withstand a single attack from this beast. Even if they didn't die, they would be crippled. The formation's power was instantly activated, and many dazzling rays of light shot toward the Moon Jade Star Beast. Not only that, but the cultivators lying in ambush also used their own techniques to attack the Moon Jade Star Beast. Lu Yi was among them. He slashed out several crescent-shaped saber rays, displaying the strength of a late-stage constellation realm cultivator. The Moon Jade Star Beast clearly didn't expect to be ambushed by so many people. It was caught off guard and suffered a loss. It roared angrily, and its huge body rampaged through the formation without restraint. In an instant, the cultivators were thrown off their feet. Wherever the Moon Jade Star Beast went, the cultivators there would suffer. On the other side, the second Moon Jade Star Beast encountered the same situation. The two battlefields were in full swing, and the battle was extremely intense. On the other hand, the cultivators who only needed to deal with the Moon Jade Star Beast had it easier. Firstly, the Moon Jade Star Beast's strength was limited, and secondly, there were many cultivators. Hence, compared to the two battlefields where the Moon Jade Star Beasts were fighting, the cultivators' battlefields were relatively stable. As long as they fought steadily, they would be able to eliminate all the Moon Jade Star Beasts. The cultivators in the two battlefields were having a hard time. The Moon Jade Star Beast's intelligence was indeed quite low, but the Moon Jade Star Beasts were still Moon Jade. Whether it was in terms of strength or physique, they were far superior to the Constellation Realm cultivators. Even with the help of the formation they had set up beforehand, the situation was still extremely dangerous. Every now and then, someone would be injured and occasionally, someone would die. Luo Shenxi lived up to his reputation as the strongest Constellation Realm cultivator in the four-way galaxy. He brandished his golden spear with peerless might. Moreover, he was extremely nimble and often managed to catch the Moon Jade Star Beast off guard and leave a few wounds on it. Lu Yi watched silently. He had a vague feeling that if Luo Shenxi had participated in the Constellation Palace back then, it wouldn't have been a problem for him to enter the top 100. This guy was quite strong. Although Luo Shenxi could injure the Moon Jade Star Beast, the difference in their cultivation levels was too great. He also encountered the same problem that Lu Yi had encountered when he fought Xue Hao. The Moon Jade Star Beast's physique was too strong. His injuries didn't affect it much. Instead, they angered the Moon Jade Star Beast. The situation was very disadvantageous for the cultivators, but none of them chose to back down. The opportunity was right before them. As long as they could deal with the two Moon Jade Star Beasts, they would have a chance to obtain it. This was the best opportunity that they had come across in the past century. Lu Yi was still unhurriedly slashing out his own blade aura. The power was not bad, but it was hard to say how effective it would be. It was not that he was afraid of death, but in this environment, he was fighting alone. Without the convenience of others, he naturally had to be more careful. The others, including Luo Shenxi, all had familiar seniors and juniors working together. Even if they couldn't form a formation, they were still well-versed in the art of cooperation. They could cover each other's attacks or retreat. As for those who could form a formation, it was needless to say. Whether it was attacking or protecting themselves, they were better than the other cultivators. Lu Yi even had the leisure to check out the situation on the other battlefields. He saw Du Lang and a group of Constellation cultivators attacking the Constellation Star Beasts. Although Du Lang wasn't very strong, he didn't stand out among the crowd. As long as he was careful, he should be fine. He also saw that the situation on the other battlefield where the Moon Jade Star Beasts were fighting was worse than his. He had Luo Shenxi on his side. He alone shared about 20% of the pressure, so the situation was much better. However, the other battlefield didn't have such a strong person. The entire battlefield was very chaotic. The Moon Jade Star Beasts were rampaging, and several people had already died in battle. As he was observing, Lu Ye's expression suddenly became solemn as he stared forward, only to see a huge figure pouncing towards him, its maw wide open, releasing a strong suction force from it. Lu Yi frowned. He didn't know why he was so unlucky as to be targeted by the Moon Jade Star Beast. He had only been hiding on the side, unleashing his saber rays. However, after thinking about it, this shouldn't be his bad luck. The Moon Jade Star Beast also knew that it had to pick on the weak. Everyone else had companions, but he was all alone. If the Moon Jade Star Beast didn't target him, who else would it target? Lu Yi hurriedly dodged. He didn't know what kind of powerful suction force was coming from the Moon Jade Star Beast's mouth. Although it couldn't suck Lu Yi into its mouth, it was clearly affecting his movements. Lu Yi finally understood why some people were so weak but couldn't even withstand a single blow from the Moon Jade Star Beast. It turned out that this was the reason. He forcefully circulated his spiritual power and narrowly avoided the Star Beast's bite. However, before he could stabilize himself, he felt a sense of danger behind him. Lu Yi didn't even need to look to know that the Star Beast was chasing after him. He had no choice but to continue dodging. Luo Shenxi's eyes lit up and he shouted, "Good job, fellow Taoist. You've restrained it like this." As he spoke, his golden spear trembled and shot out like a dragon, piercing into the Star Beast's body. However, the spear only pierced half a foot into the Star Beast's flesh. It couldn't cause any effective damage to the Star Beast. The others also took advantage of this opportunity to use their powerful techniques. The Star Beast's body was covered in blood. It looked extremely miserable, but in fact, it only stimulated its ferocious nature. The Star Beast roared and its movements became faster and faster, as if it wouldn't stop until it killed Lu Yi. Lu Yi secretly cursed his bad luck. Although he was agile, he had no problem delaying the Star Beast for a short period of time. However, if the battle dragged on, even the slightest mistake could lead to his death. Seeing that the Star Beast really only had eyes for him, Lu Yi didn't dare to hesitate and rushed in a certain direction. In that direction, there were several cultivators from the same sect who had formed a formation. It looked like they were in a good position. Seeing Lu Yi rushing towards them, the leading cultivator's expression changed and he angrily shouted, "Scram!" As he spoke, the curved blade in his hand slashed down. As he circulated his spiritual power, the curved blade suddenly shone brightly and a huge blade shadow appeared. He had used his full strength. If Lu Yi had come from another realm, this person wouldn't have been so ruthless in front of so many people. However, Lu Yi had mentioned Qi Kong's origin before, so this cultivator didn't have any scruples. The cultivators in the four-way star system all knew about Qi Kong's situation. It could be said that Qi Kong was the weakest realm in the four-way star system. If he killed it, then so be it. No one would come looking for trouble. The huge blade shadow descended. The cultivator didn't even have time to see what would happen to Lu Yi. The curved blade in his hand danced wildly, covering the Moon Jade Star Beast that was charging towards them. Although they had formed a formation and were able to display strength beyond their own, they still weren't strong enough. The Moon Jade Star Beast crashed into them, shattering the blade light. Several figures were sent flying, each of them coughing up blood. The formation collapsed on its own. The Star Beast wanted to kill them all, but Luo Shenxi had already rushed over, saving them in the nick of time. The cultivators in the four-way Star Beast attacked together, causing it to roar continuously. Lu Yi finally experienced the true might of the Yu Yao Star Beast. Although he had killed a few Yu Yaos before, he had always taken advantage of the opportunity to do so. Basically, he had always relied on external forces, either launching a sneak attack to severely injure his opponent, or using some special technique to suppress his opponent. He had never faced a Yu Yao head-on like this before. This time, he finally witnessed Yu Yao's strength. This was only a star beast, and it didn't look like anything special. Many cultivators from the four-way star systems worked together, yet they couldn't do anything to it even after expending so much effort. The difference in strength was too great. The others also realized how difficult it was to deal with this star beast. At this point, many people had already been injured, and a few unlucky ones had even died. Seeing the star beast become more and more ferocious, they couldn't help but think of retreating. Luo Shenxi noticed this and he shouted, "Hold on! Don't let your guard down." With his shout, even those who were thinking of retreating found it difficult to do so. However, the situation quickly took a turn for the better. As the constellation star beasts continued to die, more and more cultivators joined in the battle against the two Moon Jade star beasts. One had to realize that Luo Shenxi had gathered almost 1,000 people. These people were all constellation cultivators, and there was no lack of late-stage constellation cultivators among them. On average, there were several hundred people attacking one Moon Jade Star Beast. No matter how great the difference in strength was, the Moon Jade Star Beasts still couldn't resist. The two battlefields in the galaxy became more and more lively. As more and more people joined in, the situation of the two Moon Jade Star Beasts became more and more dire. Even if the constellation cultivators couldn't do much damage to them, with so many people, it was a perfect example of how many ants could kill an elephant. No matter how low the Moon Jade Star Beast's intelligence was, they still had the instinct to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. When they sensed that something was wrong, they immediately turned around and fled towards Heavenly Dog. Wherever they went, no one dared to stop them. A fierce look flashed across Luo Shenxi's eyes. He knew that this was the only way to kill the two Moon Jade Star Beasts. So many people had paid such a huge price to force the Moon Jade Star Beasts into this situation. If they failed, then all their previous efforts would be in vain. He immediately shouted, "Fellow cultivators, if we don't fight now, when are we going to fight?" As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and summoned a red light. He desperately gathered his spiritual power and poured it into the red light. A powerful aura was released from the red light. Lu Yi turned around and immediately recognized that the red light was a red talisman. However, judging from its aura, it wasn't a talisman from the humanoid tribe. It was just an ordinary red talisman. Therefore, although this red talisman was refined by a sunshine cultivator, when Luo Shenxi activated it as a constellation cultivator, its power would be reduced. It wasn't like the humanoid tribe's red talisman, which could be nourished by the humanoid tribe. As time passed, it would become more powerful. For example, when Lu Yi activated the red talisman as a cultivator in the early constellation realm, he killed Yu Yao with a single attack. Now that he was in the late constellation realm, and the red talisman had been nourishing in his body for several years, if he really activated it, he would be invincible under the sunshine cultivator. As for whether he could hurt the sunshine cultivator, the chances were slim. Seeing that Luo Shenxi had even taken out such a precious treasure like the red talisman, the others who had a similar background were no longer stingy. They all used their own methods. End of chapter. Chapter 1534. From this, one could see the benefits of having a leader in such a situation. Luo Shenxi shouted, and many people immediately came to his aid. One after another, rare treasures of various shapes were summoned. As their spiritual power surged, colorful lights began to bloom, enveloping the two fleeing star beasts. The power of heavenly treasures was generally much higher than other treasures of the same quality. This was because heavenly treasures were treasures that could only be used once. No matter who obtained one, they would treat it as their trump card and would not use it easily. However, no matter how valuable a rare treasure was, it was still no more valuable than a red talisman. Since Luo Shenxi had even used a red talisman, how could the cultivators with rare treasures be stingy with their own? This round of attacks was quite effective. The two Yu Yao star beasts were both heavily injured, and their movements had slowed down. Their auras had also decreased, and one of the Yu Yao star beasts had even lost its tail, causing it to bleed. At this moment, the red light in Luo Shenxi's hand suddenly bloomed, transforming into a shocking attack that slashed toward one of the fleeing Moon Jade star beasts. The might of this attack was almost at the level of a mid-stage Moon Jade star beast. The star beast that he had targeted was already heavily injured from the encirclement, so it had no time to dodge this attack. Suddenly, a moonlight appeared on the star beast's body, enveloping it like flowing water. This was clearly a self-defense technique. However, this method was not very effective against the red talisman's attack. The moonlight was broken, and a huge wound appeared on the astral beast's back. Through the wound, one could clearly see the squirming innards. This attack had almost cut the astral beast in half. However, it was still not dead. As if it knew that it was doomed, it actually turned around and charged back. "Kill!" Luo Shenxi shouted. Many cultivators attacked together, quickly killing the star beast on the spot. However, the crowd watched helplessly as the second star beast fled in a sorry state. That star beast was also heavily injured, but it still managed to escape. Even if someone tried to stop it, they could not stop it. Many cultivators had died in this battle, yet only one of the two lunar star beasts had been killed. And this was under the premise that Luo Shenxi had paid the price of a red talisman. Such a result was definitely not a passing grade. However, since it had come to this, everyone could only accept it. At the end of the day, even if these 1,000 people had come in response to the summons, they were still a sheet of loose sand. If they really came from the same sect and worked together, they would still be able to slay the two Yu Yaos of the Thousand-Star Mansion. After the battle, some people immediately flew in the direction of Heavenly Dog. Even though one of the Moon Jade Star Beasts had escaped, they were severely injured, so it was hard to say how much of their strength they could still unleash. Thus, there was nothing to be afraid of. Now that the biggest obstacle had been cleared, the cultivators naturally couldn't wait to head to the Heavenly Dog planet in search of opportunities. A large number of cultivators left, and Luo Shenxi sat cross-legged to recover. Activating the red talisman had consumed a lot of his spiritual power. There were a few figures standing beside him, and they should be Luo Shenxi's peers. One of them looked at the departing cultivators and harumphed coldly. A motley crew. It was clear that they didn't want to hide anything from the other cultivators. Based on their performance just now, it was certain that many people had been holding back. If more people had summoned their rare treasures, then the second star beast might not have had the chance to escape. Luo Shenxi had even used his red talisman, yet these people were still unwilling to part with a rare treasure. This was naturally infuriating. However, another person chuckled softly and said, "It's hard to fathom a person's heart. There's no need to force it. Besides, this is a good thing for us." The person who spoke earlier frowned. "How is it a good thing that Yu Yao is still alive?" That person said, "Even though that Yu Yao isn't dead, she's severely injured. Even if we accidentally run into her, she won't be much of a threat. However, if the others run into her, they were all very powerful, and they even had someone like Luo Shenxi with them. If they really ran into the severely injured Yu Yao, they would indeed be able to put up a fight. However, the others didn't have their trump cards." The cultivator who spoke earlier suddenly came to a realization. So that's how it is. His gloomy mood was instantly swept away. Even though the cultivators from the 4 galaxies had been working together earlier, once they entered Heavenly Dog Planet, unless they were from the same realm, they would all be enemies. If they could eliminate more opponents, then their chances of obtaining the Star Beast would also be higher. While Luo Shenxi was still recovering, Lu Yi had already arrived at Heavenly Dog Planet on his Star Beast with Li Shang and Du Lang in tow. They charged into the thick clouds and looked down from above. The environment on Heavenly Dog Planet was extremely harsh. Aside from star beasts, no other living beings could survive on such a desolate planet for long periods of time. Lu Yi had been curious as to why a star beast would treat a desolate planet as its lair. However, when he arrived, he discovered that this desolate planet was somewhat special. There were huge craters everywhere on Heavenly Dog Planet's surface. The depth of each crater was unknown, and the insides were pitch black. There were countless such craters on the entire surface of Heavenly Dog Planet. Du Lang stood beside Lu Yi and explained, "The interior of Heavenly Dog Planet is like a beehive. The terrain is extremely intricate and complex. That Moon Jade Star Beast must have fled back. No one knows where it is hiding. Brother Lu, you have to be careful." Lu Yi nodded and carefully observed this desolate planet from above. He vaguely felt that this desolate planet's shape resembled a huge heavenly dog. It wasn't just a simple resemblance. This was because he had seen similar realms before. When Lu Yi first arrived at the Blood Refinement Realm, he felt that the Blood Refinement Realm was like the body of a female giant with her head and limbs cut off. In the end, it was confirmed that it was indeed the body of a female giant. However, she had died many years ago, and no one knew who killed her. After her death, her body turned into a realm. If Heavenly Dog Planet's situation was the same as the Blood Refinement Realm, then didn't that mean that this was also a realm formed by the corpse of an extremely powerful star beast? The Blood Refinement Realm gave birth to the Blood Clan, while Heavenly Dog Planet gave birth to the Heavenly Dog Star Beast. The two had many similarities. If that was the case, it was understandable that the Heavenly Dog Star Beast used this place as its nest. This was the place that gave birth to them. There were no traces of other cultivators. Those who came here had already entered the underground through the holes on the surface. Lu Yi was very curious about what kind of opportunity could be considered a unique opportunity for a weapon cultivator. Originally, he didn't want to get involved. However, due to various coincidences, since he was already here, there was no harm in joining in the fun. As for the lunar jade star beast that had escaped, Lu Yi naturally wasn't afraid of it. Lu Yi steered the star boat to a random hole. He put away the star boat and took the lead to enter. Du Lang and Li Shang, who were carrying the little girl, followed closely behind. After descending for nearly 10,000 feet, they finally reached the bottom of the hole. The bottom wasn't completely sealed. There were passages in all directions. Just as Du Lang had said, the interior of Heavenly Dog Planet was like a complicated beehive. Lu Yi didn't know which direction to go, so he randomly chose a direction and led the way forward. As he walked, he looked around. There were forks in the path from time to time. Lu Yi went straight ahead without any pattern. Soon, he discovered a problem. Inside Heavenly Dog Planet, his divine sense was greatly suppressed and could only extend about 10 feet from his body. This made him feel a little strange, because he did not sense any strange power from this place. It was understandable that the mist dragon suppressed his divine sense. After all, it was a starry sky wonder, but what was so strange about the interior of the Heavenly Dog Star? Gradually, Lu Ye's expression became bewildered, because he found that this passageway didn't seem to be a simple passageway. Combining this with his previous conjecture about Heavenly Dog Planet, Lu Yi was shocked. Could these passages be blood vessels? The passages were large and small, and there were many forks. The more forked the passages were, the smaller they were, very much like blood vessels. Occasionally, he could hear some sounds of fighting, but because the passages were complicated, Lu Yi couldn't tell where these sounds were coming from. After walking for a while, they suddenly entered a relatively spacious space. However, inside that space, pairs of scarlet eyes suddenly lit up and stared straight at Lu Yi and the others. Immediately after, the roars of beasts could be heard as Heavenly Dog Star Beasts pounced. Lu Yi sensed that these star beasts weren't very strong. The strongest was only at the constellation realm, and some were only equivalent to divine sea and true lake realm star beasts. Naturally, he didn't take them seriously. The mountain pansaber's saber flashed a few times and killed these star beasts. As they continued forward, they encountered some Heavenly Dog Star Beasts from time to time. However, they weren't very strong and could be easily dealt with. However, Lu Yi discovered something interesting. These Heavenly Dog Star Beasts seemed to have some special abilities here. They could perfectly hide themselves and were difficult to detect before they launched a sneak attack. There were several times when Lu Yi only noticed when the star beasts launched their attacks. This was obviously not an ability of the Heavenly Dog Star Beasts. There was a high chance that the special environment of this place gave them this ability. After all, this was the place where they were born. It wasn't surprising that they could display some special abilities here. Occasionally, there would be sounds of fighting coming from all directions. It was obvious that those cultivators were fighting. However, after walking for so long, Lu Yi didn't encounter any cultivators. Luo Shensi had gathered more than 1,000 cultivators. Even though there were casualties in the previous battle, there were still 800 to 900 people who entered the Heavenly Dog Star. So many people, but they didn't encounter each other. It was obvious that the internal environment of this place was complicated. Lu Yi searched for 2 consecutive days. Besides encountering some constellation heavenly dogs, he didn't find anything else. If this continued, Lu Yi estimated that he might not find anything even if he searched here for a few months. After thinking carefully, if the opportunity was really on the Heavenly Dog Star, it should be in a more special place. For example, where the heart was, or where the brain was. When he thought of this, Lu Yi felt that he had a direction. It wasn't difficult to reach the location of the heart. He just had to follow the largest passage all the way. Lu Yi remembered that he entered the heavenly dog star from the direction of the spine. Therefore, it shouldn't be far from the location of the heart. End of chapter. Chapter 1535. Although Lu Yi was unsure of the exact location of the heart, if his previous speculation was correct, as long as he followed the largest passage, he would be able to reach the heart. Sure enough, a day later, Lu Yi and the others suddenly entered a huge chamber. This chamber was much larger than any of the spaces he had encountered before, and its shape was very strange. If one examined it carefully, it really did look like a giant heart. Unfortunately, Lu Yi did not find anything special here. However, there were traces left behind by others because there were some heavenly dog star beast corpses here. After searching for a while, Lu Yi was about to go back when his figure suddenly paused and looked ahead with rapt attention. Li Shang seemed to have noticed this and also stopped. Although Du Lang did not know what had happened, when he saw Lu Ye's posture, he knew the situation was not good, so he secretly urged his spirit qi and became alert. The sound of footsteps suddenly came from the front, followed by several figures. It seemed that there were many people who had the same idea as Lu Yi. Some people had come to explore this place before, and now there were more. A moment later, they met face to face. The leader of the three was first stunned when he saw Lu Yi and then became angry. "It's you!" As he spoke, Lu Yi also recognized these three people. Although he did not know the origins of these three people, they had all joined forces to fight against one of the Jade Moon Star beasts. At that time, Lu Yi was alone and was targeted by the Jade Moon Star beast. He had no choice but to escape, and while hiding, he borrowed the strength of these three people to block the Jade Moon Star beast. Because these three people were from the same sect, they were able to form a powerful battle array. As it turned out, these three people's battle array was quite good. Although the battle array was broken by the Jade Moon Star beast's brutal charge, there was no danger to their lives. Later, with Luo Shenxi's timely support, there were no casualties. At that time, Lu Yi had no choice but to do so, but for these three people, Lu Yi was the perfect scapegoat. So, at that time, the leader did not hesitate to cut down Lu Yi, but in the end he could not do anything to Lu Yi. The past was the past. Now that everyone was exploring the heavenly dog star, it would have been fine if they had not encountered Lu Yi, but since they had, they naturally did not treat Lu Yi well. After recognizing Lu Yi, the three men's faces were filled with hostility. The leader even summoned his curved blade, his spiritual energy surging fiercely as he made no attempt to hide his murderous intent. Dou Lang's expression changed. "Yujin, what do you mean?" Lu Yi did not know these people, but Dou Lang did. This was because they were all from the indefinite galaxy. Eugene and the others came from a very powerful domain. These people were all very powerful, especially in this situation. They could even form a matrix. If they really fought, Dou Lang felt that his side would not be a match for them. Eugene's expression was indifferent. "Since you're already here, don't ask such a childish question." He slowly raised his scimitar and pointed it at Lu Yi. "Let's settle the score from before." Lu Yi suddenly floated back, distancing herself from them. Even as she floated back, she urged her spiritual power to wrap around Li Shang and Du Lang as well. When Eugene saw this, he thought that Lu Yi was afraid of him. His eyes were filled with contempt. No wonder Qi Kong ended up like this. He's just a bunch of cowards. Dou Lang clenched his fists, but he did not dare to refute. This was because he knew that if he did not provoke the other party, he might still have a chance to live. However, if he really angered the other party, he would definitely be killed. If he was killed here, no one would uphold justice. "Be careful," Lu Yi suddenly said. Eugene was stunned. "What?" As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly felt a great danger behind him. Then, a strong smell of blood lingered at the tip of his nose. When he hurriedly turned his head to look, he saw that a huge figure had unknowingly appeared in the shadows. It opened its bloody mouth and bit at the two fellow disciples standing behind him. Eugene turned pale with fright and quickly shouted, "Dodge!" However, it was still too late. When the bloody mouth closed, there was a scream. The sound of chewing and bones breaking could be heard at the same time. The two auras were instantly annihilated. Yu Jin's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He did not expect to be so unlucky as to encounter the injured Moon Jade Star Beast. This Star Beast had been hiding here all this time, but they did not notice it when they arrived. At this moment, the heavily injured Moon Jade Star Beast was standing 10 feet behind him. It was savagely chewing as blood flowed from the corner of its mouth. Eugene reacted quickly. He knew that he was no match for this Star Beast, so he rushed forward. However, the Moon Jade Star Beast was even faster. A black shadow suddenly appeared behind it. Eugene's body stiffened. He looked down with difficulty and saw an arrow-like object piercing through his chest. The Moon Jade Star Beast's aura and vitality still lingered on it. It was its tail. Save. Eugene looked at Lu Yi in despair. He reached out to grab him, as if he was trying to grab hold of a life-saving straw. The Moon Jade Star Beast's tail shook like an arrow and pulled Eugene back. It threw him into its mouth and chewed. In the blink of an eye, 3 constellations died. Du Lang's scalp was numb. He only participated in attacking the Constellation-class Star Beasts. He did not face the Moon Jade Star Beast directly. Only now did he realize how terrifying the Moon Jade Star Beast was. And this was just a heavily injured Moon Jade Star Beast. He finally understood why Lu Yi suddenly stopped. Du Lang thought that Lu Yi had sensed the arrival of Eugene and the others. Now, it seemed that Lu Yi had sensed the hidden Moon Jade Star Beast. The arrival of Eugene and the others was just an accident. Now that Eugene and the others were dead, the 3 of them were trapped in the heart chamber. They would soon follow in Eugene's footsteps. Knowing that he was going to die without a doubt, Du Lang was not so nervous. His entire body relaxed. For the past few years, he had been living under someone else's roof and acting according to their wishes. His days had been very depressing. It did not seem unacceptable to die like this. In front of Du Lang, Lu Yi looked at the Moon Jade Star Beast and secretly assessed his current strength. He felt that it was better not to take the risk. Although he had the buff of deathly possession, and if he went all out, he might be able to fight against the Moon Jade Star Beast. However, this Star Beast was still at the middle stage of the Moon Jade Star Beast. Although it was heavily injured, it was even more ferocious. Fighting with such a Star Beast in such a narrow space was not a wise decision. Thinking of this, Lu Yi silently took out his money. Whether or not this thing was as powerful as he thought, he had to try it out to find out. The Moon Jade Star Beast was still not satisfied after eating Eugene and the others. It roared in Lu Ye's direction and pressed down on him like a mountain. However, a silver light suddenly bloomed from Lu Ye's hand and shot toward it. The astral beast was unlucky. It was actually very fast. If they were in the vast starry sky, the silver light might not have been able to hit it. However, the cramped environment restricted its movements. When it saw the silver light, the astral beast had already intended to dodge. However, due to the limited terrain, it was unable to do so. The silver light hit its lower abdomen, but it did not cause any damage. However, the star beast looked as if it had been struck by lightning. Its vigorous body suddenly became incomparably heavy, and it fell to the ground with a loud boom. The silver light on its lower abdomen spread out like mercury, and in the blink of an eye, it was enveloped in a layer of silver light. From afar, it looked like a giant beast made of silver water. It maintained its posture with its front claws extended. Its sharp claws were trembling slightly, as if it was resisting some kind of power. However, it was unable to break free. Its eyes had turned blood red, and they were filled with ruthlessness and anger. Lu Yi clicked his tongue in wonder. Although he had personally experienced the power of the treasure coin before, he had been struck by a bronze light. It was completely different from this silver light. Therefore, Lu Yi could not be sure what kind of power the treasure coin could unleash. He had already tried his best to overestimate the power of the treasure coin, but he had still underestimated it. He thought that the coin would only slow down the Moon Jade Star Beast a little. He didn't expect it to be able to bind the beast. Strictly speaking, it was not a binding, but a mysterious seal. Lu Yi was not the only one who was shocked. Du Lang was dumbfounded, and Li Shang was also dumbfounded. Under their astonished gazes, Lu Yi slowly walked up to the moon jade star beast. His entire body was practically standing in front of the beast's gaping maw. Du Lang was drenched in cold sweat. He touched the moon jade star beast in front of him, and he found that there was a piece of silver in his hand. It was very strange. Then he leaped up and landed on the moon jade star beast's back. He looked around and saw that the beast's back was covered in wounds. Some were big, some were small, some were deep, and some were shallow. However, because it had been several days since the previous battle with the moon jade star beast's physique, these wounds were already healing. Lu Yi found a relatively large wound and pulled out the Pan Shan saber. With the enhancement of the Divine Edge Spirit Mark, the Pan Shan saber's blade flashed with light. The saber cut 3 inches into the beast's flesh, and blood splattered everywhere. However, Lu Yi's hand went numb. A mid-stage moon jade star beast's physique was unimaginably strong. His saber had almost no effect. Stimulated by the saber strike, the moon jade star beast unleashed its full power. However, under the silver light seal, it could not move at all. It could only unleash its full power. Other than making Lu Yi feel a little uncomfortable, it did not have much practical effect. Lu Yi's saber rose and fell, slashing again and again. After more than 100 consecutive slashes, the moon jade star beast's body was finally cut open, revealing its innards. The violent eruption of power made Lu Yi's entire body steaming. Blood gushed out of his body like a river. Du Lang watched in a daze. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he would have found it hard to believe that such a ridiculous thing could happen. A powerful moon jade star beast was sealed by some mysterious power, unable to move at all. Then, it was hacked to death by a constellation. After a long time, the moon jade star beast's life force slowly dissipated. Its blood-red eyes were filled with anger and unwillingness. End of chapter. Chapter 1536. As the moon jade astral beast's life force was extinguished, the aura that had swept through the area also dissipated. Lu Yi stood on top of the astral beast's corpse and held the coin in his hand. After he shot out the silver light, the treasure coin returned to its original appearance. It looked unremarkable, and there was no reaction when he poured his spirit energy into it. However, after the battle just now, Lu Yi knew that the power of this thing was a little too strong. However, it would cost a lot to use this coin. It didn't react to a cultivator's spiritual power, but it could absorb the power of spirit jades. This should be the reason why the armored armadillo beast was able to activate the power of the coin. However, the armored armadillo beast lived in the starry sky, so it could only find a limited number of spirit jades. Therefore, it could only activate a bronze light. However, after the coin devoured 3 million spirit jades, it evolved into an even more powerful silver light. The bronze light was unstoppable in the constellation realm. The silver light sealed the moon jade realm, making it look like a silver eagle. Lu Yi couldn't help but wonder if there was a golden light above the bronze and silver light. If he wanted the coin to emit a golden light, how many spirit jades would he need to devour? If there really was a golden light, would it be able to seal even the sun? However, it was only a thought. The silver light from the coin had already cost him 3 million spirit jades. If he wanted to create an even more powerful one, he didn't know how much it would cost. He didn't have that many spirit jades to squander, so he had to save them for later use. At the very least, he would need a lot of spirit jades when the Kingdom of the 9 States fleet sailed. After putting away the coin, Lu Yi rummaged through the moon jade astral beast's stomach and found the storage rings of Eugene and the others. The 3 of them were simply unlucky. They had mistakenly entered this place and were eaten by the moon jade astral beast. However, they were still constellation realm cultivators, so their storage rings had some value. Lu Yi was about to put away the moon jade astral beast's corpse. In any case, he had spent 3 million spirit jades to kill this astral beast. The corpse itself had some value, so it could be considered a supplement. However, he was surprised to find that he couldn't put the corpse into his storage ring. This was the first time he had encountered something like this. Generally, there were only 2 possibilities for such a situation. The first was that the item being collected was too large for the storage ring to contain. The second was that it was a living creature or some other special existence. For example, the storage ring itself could not be stored by other storage rings. Although this star beast's corpse was large, it wasn't so large that a storage ring couldn't contain it. Lu Yi couldn't help wondering if there were other storage rings inside this star beast's corpse. It was very likely that it had devoured more than just Eugene and the other two cultivators. With that thought in mind, he began to search carefully again. Soon, Lu Yi found something in the bloody abdominal cavity. What surprised him was that it was not a storage ring. It looked like a small statue. Lu Yi fetched some clear water to wash it, and found that it was indeed a statue. After taking a closer look, he realized that the craftsmanship of the person who carved this statue wasn't very good. The statue looked very blurry, and he could only vaguely see the facial features. He couldn't tell what race it was. Lu Yi tried to put it into his storage ring, but found that he couldn't do it at all. It seemed that he couldn't put away the star beast's corpse just now because of this statue. Li Shang and Du Lang also came over to take a look, but they couldn't see much. However, since this thing couldn't be put into a storage ring, it shouldn't be an ordinary thing. Lu Yi tried to pour his spirit power into it and clearly felt that his spirit power was absorbed by the statue. In the next moment, Lu Ye's expression turned cold, and he suddenly threw the statue away with a look of vigilance. "What's wrong?" Li Shang asked. "It looked at me," Lu Yi said in a deep voice. Li Shang was stunned. "It looked at you? You didn't see it?" Lu Yi frowned. Li Shang shook her head. She only noticed that Lu Yi urged his spirit power and then suddenly threw the statue away. Lu Yi looked at Du Lang on the side. "It just opened its eyes. Did you see it?" Du Lang also shook his head. "No, could it be that Brother Lu's eyes are playing tricks on you?" Lu Yi didn't speak. He didn't think it was his eyes playing tricks on him, because when he poured his spirit power into the statue did open its eyes and look at him. The look in its eyes was a little strange, and it looked like it was smiling but not smiling, which made Lu Yi faintly wonder if this statue was a living thing. Otherwise, why couldn't it be put into his storage ring? Just as he was feeling bewildered, he suddenly saw a strange green halo emerge from where the statue was and quickly spread out in all directions. Lu Yi and the other two hurriedly rose into the air and avoided the halo, not knowing what was going on. But the next moment, Li Shang's face changed. "I'm being rejected." Du Lang was startled and immediately overjoyed. "The blue halo is flowing. It's an opportunity. I know. This is the opportunity." He didn't say it clearly, but the meaning was very clear. This is the opportunity? No matter how Lu Yi looked at it, this change didn't look like an opportunity. Du Lang explained, "That sentence was inadvertently said by Su Dingyang before. I don't know the specific situation, but this must be an opportunity. Brother Lu is really lucky." So many people entered Heavenly Dog Star in search of the legendary opportunity, but they didn't expect that it would be swallowed into the stomach of a Moon Jade Star Beast. If Lu Yi hadn't killed the Moon Jade Star Beast, he really wouldn't have found it. Du Lang looked at Li Shang again. "Fellow Taoist, you don't have to resist. This is an opportunity unique to weapon cultivators. Fellow Taoist is not a weapon cultivator, so you are being rejected. There is no danger. Fellow Taoist just needs to relax." Hearing this, Li Shang no longer resisted. In the next instant, her figure suddenly disappeared, and no one knew where she went. Outside Heavenly Dog Star, Li Shang's figure suddenly appeared less than 3,000 miles away from Heavenly Dog Star, along with the figures of other cultivators, about 100 people. Li Shang looked around and found that although she couldn't tell what sect those people were from, they didn't look like weapon cultivators. She immediately understood that Du Lang was right. This was an opportunity unique to weapon cultivators, and non-weapon cultivators couldn't stay in it. Those who weren't weapon cultivators had been rejected, and only those weapon cultivators stayed on Heavenly Dog Star. She thought to herself, it seemed that even if Lu Yi found the opportunity first, she couldn't get it. There should be a test, otherwise, it didn't make sense for all weapon cultivators to stay. She was afraid that only by passing the test could she really get the opportunity, and this was the right thing to do. Thinking this, Li Shang quietly stood in place and waited. In the heart cavity, the green halo became more and more intense, as if it was filled with green liquid. Even Lu Yi and Du Lang were in midair, they were enveloped in it. Not only the heart cavity, but the entire interior of Heavenly Dog Star had been enveloped by this green halo. Many cultivators who knew the truth showed joy on their faces, knowing that the opportunity had been found and its power had been activated. Now, what they needed to do was to do all they could to pass the test. This opportunity had appeared in the barren land for 100 years. In this 100 years, similar situations had occurred more than once. Those powerful realms knew the specific situation, but realms like the Red Sky realm didn't know much about it. Shrouded in the green halo, Lu Yi felt that everything around him was quickly moving away. Just now, he could still see Du Lang's figure, but in the blink of an eye, Du Lang was gone. His body suddenly became light, and when he came back to his senses, Lu Yi found that he had appeared in a green hall. Before he could observe the situation in the hall, Lu Yi felt an inexplicable force sweep through his body, and under that inexplicable force, it was as if everything about him was open. He wasn't the only one who had such an encounter. All the cultivators wrapped in the green halo came to such a green hall like him and had the same experience. However, even though the cyan halls that the cultivators were in looked the same, they were clearly not the same space. Every one of them was in a separate hall. The power that swept over his body left as quickly as it came. After the power disappeared, Lu Yi focused his attention and looked forward. Not far in front of him was the strange statue, but as Lu Yi's gaze focused, the statue quickly melted, then twisted and squirmed, turning into a human figure. Lu Yi was dumbfounded, because the human figure that the statue had turned into was exactly the same as him. Not only did it look like him, but even its aura was the same. The other party was even wearing the same mountain pan blade. Ever since he started cultivating, Lu Yi had encountered many strange things, but this was the first time he had encountered something as strange as this. Although Lu Yi didn't know what was going on, he knew that he had to make the first move to gain the upper hand. As such, when he saw the figure that looked exactly like him, he didn't hesitate. He drew his mountain pan blade and slashed out a few sharp saber lights at the other party. His body and saber moved as fast as lightning, and he charged forward. However, what shocked him the most was that at the same time he made his move, the other party also made his move. His aura suddenly became extremely domineering and aggressive. A long saber, identical to the mountain pan saber, was unsheathed from his waist. The saber gleamed like snow. Domineering saber art. Lu Yi's eyes narrowed. This figure that looked exactly like him actually used the domineering saber art. The saber light shattered, and the two mountain sabers collided. Lu Yi's body leaned forward, and he used all his strength to press forward. However, the strength coming from the other side was no less than his own, and it actually blocked his thunderous saber. Their faces were only 3 inches apart, and when their gazes met, they could clearly see their own reflections in each other's eyes. After a moment of deadlock, both sides exerted their strength at almost the same time. Saber cries rang out, and the two figures leaned back. Saber halos visible to the naked eye spread out from the point of contact. The two figures instantly stabilized themselves, and their sabers slashed at each other once more. End of chapter. Chapter 1537. There were no flashy collisions, only the sounds of saber light and saber cries. With each collision, whether it was Lu Yi or the figure transformed from the sculpture, their bodies trembled violently as their spiritual qi surged. After just a moment of fighting, Lu Yi confirmed one thing: this opponent was his other self. Not only did he have the exact same appearance and saber as himself, even his strength and fighting style were no different from his own. Was this the test of the opportunity? It seemed that if he wanted to obtain this opportunity, he must first pass this test. In other words, he had to get rid of his other self. Lu Yi had never experienced such a bizarre thing before, so for a moment he felt a sense of novelty. But then came the question, how could a person rely on their own strength to get rid of their other self? Many thoughts flashed through his mind, but Lu Yi's mind calmed down and his eyes were as firm as ice. No matter how similar the figure in front of him looked, it was only a figure, not his real self. This was most likely an extremely advanced illusion, so advanced that even with his eyesight he could not see any flaws. The collision of force against force, the clashing of blade against blade, continued without end. The danger of a battle between weapon cultivators was vividly reflected at this moment. Every time they clashed, both sides were almost walking on the edge of life and death. This was something that Lu Yi could never experience when fighting other enemies. So far, among the enemies he had encountered, even if they were on par with him in terms of strength, it was impossible for them to have the same fighting style as him, so it was very rare for such a scene to occur. However, in this battle, they were truly evenly matched. Moreover, the auras of both sides were extremely aggressive. Every time the saber slashed down, it was extremely oppressive. Either the enemy would die, or they would die. But in such an intense battle, the two figures were able to perfectly block each other's attacks without suffering the slightest injury. Lu Yi felt like he was looking into a mirror. Although this battle was fierce, it made him feel extremely uncomfortable. Until a certain moment, the figure opposite him suddenly changed his saber stance and a light bloomed. Lu Yi was startled and hurriedly retreated. Like the explosion of the sun, a saber lotus slowly bloomed, each petal dancing in the air condensed from saber light. Soon, half of the hall was covered by this saber lotus. Son of the lotus! Even though Lu Yi had guessed that the other party might be able to use the 3 tyrant saber techniques when he had seen the other party use the tyrant saber technique, Lu Yi still found it hard to believe when he saw it with his own eyes. This illusion was a little too brilliant. All of his abilities could be perfectly displayed by the figure in front of him. This was the first time he faced the might of the Lotus Sun directly. This feeling was completely different from when he used it himself. This feeling was from the perspective of the person being attacked, and he could feel the terror of the Lotus Sun more and more. Even though he saw that the situation was bad and retreated, he still couldn't avoid being enveloped by the aftershocks of the Lotus Sun. Being sliced by the saber light from all directions, Lu Yi hurriedly constructed the Holy Protection Spirit rune to resolve the situation. Before he could stabilize his body, bits of saber light attacked him from the front. Stars. He couldn't avoid it. Lu Yi's skin tightened and he felt a chill run down his spine. In his field of vision, he could only see the stars in the sky falling towards him. After losing the initiative in one move, Lu Yi found that the other party's attacks were endless. It seemed like the other party wanted to kill him here. If he was killed by his other self in such a test, it would be too embarrassing. Even the Holy Protection Spirit rune couldn't block such a continuous and violent attack. He knew his own offensive power very well, so Lu Yi didn't defend at all. He just activated his saber aura and slashed out continuously. The sound of the tide sea rang out, layer upon layer, endless. The stars fell and the tide sea broke. Lu Yi felt a slight pain in his arm and took the opportunity to retreat. Before he could stabilize himself, a figure wrapped in boundless killing intent pounced on him from the broken saber light. The extremely violent and oppressive aura made one's heart heavy. Lu Yi finally understood what his enemy had faced. Under the pressure of such a domineering aura, if one's mind wasn't calm enough, it would be easy to fall into a disadvantage. Even if one was strong enough, they might not be able to fully display their strength. He spun his saber and rushed forward to meet the other party. This was the only thing he could do now. The two sabers collided again with a loud bang and both figures shook. Although the other party had won just now, Lu Yi had stabilized his mind and wouldn't be defeated for a while. But gradually he realized that something was not quite right. He glanced at his right arm, where there was a knife wound. Logically speaking, such a flesh wound was nothing to him. With his current powerful physique and vitality, it wouldn't take long for him to recover. But in fact, this small wound hadn't healed at all. Not only had it not healed, but it was even expanding. Blood flowed from it and dyed his clothes red. Lu Yi could clearly sense that there was a strange power lingering around the wound, hindering its recovery and preventing his strong physique and vitality from playing the slightest role. Lu Yi frowned slightly. It was a little difficult to determine whether his guess was correct or not. He had thought that everything here was just an illusion, but it was so brilliant that he couldn't see any flaws. But if it was an illusion, how could he have been injured? And the injury was so strange. Could it be that this wasn't an illusion? With this distraction, the balance of power he had managed to maintain with great difficulty was broken again. Lu Yi only saw a flash of saber light, and even though he tried to dodge, he couldn't avoid it, and a wound appeared on his lower abdomen. Raising his saber to block the other party's attack, Lu Yi silently sensed the condition of the wound on his lower abdomen and found that it was the same as the one on his arm, surrounded by a strange power. Under the influence of this power, not only was the wound unable to heal, it was slowly worsening. The other party's saber was strange. Lu Yi immediately understood one thing. Although the other party's saber looked exactly the same as the Panshan saber, it wasn't the real Panshan saber. There was a strange power on the saber that hindered the recovery of injuries and even made them worse. In the short term, this strange power wouldn't have much of an effect on Lu Yi, but in the long term, it was hard to say. Moreover, Lu Yi was facing another version of himself this time, one who possessed all of his own abilities. Any weakness on his side could be the key to victory. Lu Yi hurriedly urged the power of his talent tree to burn his body. In an instant, the strange power lingering on his 2 wounds was burned away, and under the effect of his powerful physique and vitality, his wounds quickly began to heal. After solving this problem, Lu Yi finally relaxed, but the situation was still not optimistic. Originally, the two of them were evenly matched, but the slight delay just now had caused Lu Ye's side to fall into a slight disadvantage. He knew in his heart that if he could not quickly recover from this disadvantage, it would only become worse and worse. This was because his fighting style was like this. A slight advantage would quickly expand as the oppressive power of his opponent increased, and in the end, victory would be decided. But when faced with such an enemy, how could he recover from this disadvantage? Lu Yi couldn't think of what to do. Even facing Yu Yao wasn't as difficult as this battle. Lu Yi suddenly realized something. The most difficult enemy to defeat in this world was actually himself. This was very comical. He considered whether or not he should wear the dragon throne. He had the dragon throne, but his opponent couldn't possibly have one as well. Just as he was about to give it a try, he discovered that he couldn't open his storage ring. Startled, he tried to connect to the red talisman in his body, but he discovered that even the red talisman couldn't be activated. Lu Yi instantly understood. In this kind of battle, there was no way to borrow external power. He could only rely on his own strength. As his opponent slashed out with his saber, Lu Ye's eyes suddenly lit up. He hurriedly raised his saber to meet the attack. The timing of this attack was extremely ingenious, and it forcibly reversed his weak disadvantage. So, he had a flaw in his fighting style. The saber strike that his opponent had slashed out just now had a small flaw, or rather, a flaw that wasn't smooth enough. This kind of flaw was often fleeting and difficult to grasp, but Lu Yi had everything that his opponent had, so it wasn't difficult for him to seize this opportunity. Lu Yi really hadn't discovered this before. After all, he had never had such an experience before. He was secretly afraid. If his opponent had seized this opportunity in the past, he would have been in great trouble, but since he had discovered it now, he naturally wouldn't make the same mistake in the future. Lu Ye's heart suddenly moved. This kind of opportunity was very rare. Perhaps he could use this opportunity to find his own shortcomings and correct them. Thinking so, Lu Yi became interested in this kind of battle and pushed his strength to the limit, constantly clashing with the enemy in front of him. This allowed him to find many of his own shortcomings, especially after he had gained the upper hand. His aggressive offensive often gave his opponent some opportunities to take advantage of. In the past, he hadn't been overturned by his opponent because his opponent's strength and eyesight weren't enough. If his strength and eyesight were enough, even the slightest opportunity would be enough to make Lu Yi fall beyond redemption. Lu Yi secretly broke out in a cold sweat. He really hadn't discovered these things before, mainly because his cultivation progress was too fast. Moreover, no one had taught him systematically. His saber skills were basically instincts honed through life and death situations. These things were enough for Lu Yi to dominate most cultivators of the same level. Perhaps some people had seen some flaws, but in the face of Lu Ye's overwhelming strength, they had been powerless to fight back. However, one's own fate was ultimately in their own hands. They couldn't pin their hopes on the weakness of others. Lu Yi found that this was an extremely rare opportunity, an opportunity to make up for his shortcomings. It was really like looking into a mirror, finding his own shortcomings from the reflection in the mirror and then correcting them. End of chapter. Chapter 1538. Lu Yi suddenly understood one thing. He knew the truth behind this so-called opportunity that belonged solely to weapon cultivators. Originally, he thought that only by passing this test could he get the opportunity. But now, it seemed that this test itself was the greatest opportunity. After this time, his saber skills would certainly rise to a higher level. This was a benefit that could not be obtained through ordinary cultivation. As for why it was a weapon cultivator, Lu Yi could not figure it out. But according to Du Lang, this opportunity had appeared in the barren land for 100 years, and it had appeared several times in the past 100 years. If it was really a physical opportunity, it would have been taken away long ago. Why would it wait until now? Only such a strange opportunity would be preserved. This was probably the result of the acquiescence of the powerhouses in the 4 galaxies. They left such an opportunity here, allowing the weapon cultivators in the galaxy to come and hone themselves and improve their fighting power. However, Lu Yi soon discovered something strange. The enemy opposite him seemed to have a strong learning ability. Once he found his flaws and countered them, his flaws would disappear and never appear again. Time passed slowly in the fierce battle. At first, Lu Yi could still maintain the balance between them by constantly looking for flaws. But as the other party's saber skills continued to perfect, it was difficult to find flaws. Lu Yi could no longer find any opportunities that could be exploited. The battle returned to a state of being evenly matched, and neither side could do anything to the other. But Lu Yi knew that if this continued, he would only be defeated. It could even be said that if he did not have the talent tree, he would have been defeated long ago because the wound caused by the other party's saber was too strange. Although he had the talent tree to restrain the mysterious power of the other party's saber, if he did not get rid of the other party, this battle would only be endless. He had to find a way to kill the other him. This was the drawback of insufficient information. Cultivators like Su Dingyang and Luo Shenxi, who knew the details of the opportunity, would never have the idea of killing the other him because they knew that it was too difficult and basically impossible. At this moment, 2 days had passed since the opportunity inside the Heavenly Dog Planet was triggered. During these 2 days, cultivators constantly appeared out of thin air outside the Heavenly Dog Planet. They were all weapon cultivators who had previously stayed inside. The first group of people who appeared were clearly somewhat dejected and vexed because they had been defeated too early and did not obtain too many benefits from such a fortuitous encounter. However, the more cultivators who appeared later, the happier they were because they had obtained enough benefits. Li Shang, who was waiting outside, didn't know what was going on. He didn't see Lu Yi appear, so he couldn't find anyone to inquire about the situation. Fortunately, Du Lang appeared and greeted him with joy. Li Shang quickly asked, "What's the situation inside?" Du Lang hurriedly recounted what had happened to him. Li Shang immediately revealed a thoughtful expression and then asked for many details. Du Lang told him everything he knew. Finally, she asked, "How did you get out?" Du Lang said, "If he loses, he will naturally come out." Li Shang understood that Lu Yi hadn't appeared yet, so he must still be fighting inside and hadn't been defeated. However, the sooner or later a cultivator's defeat seemed to have nothing to do with cultivation, because there were cultivators in the late constellation realm who came out before, but it wasn't until now that Du Lang, who was in the early constellation realm, appeared. This was because the enemy everyone encountered inside was themselves. The more people who could perceive their own shortcomings, the more they could persevere. Lu Yi didn't know that as long as he was defeated, he could leave. Right now, he only wanted to kill the opponent in front of him. But everyone had the same foundation, the same strength, and the same fighting style. Everything that Lu Yi could use, the enemy could use. Under the premise that he couldn't rely on any external forces, It was simply an impossible task to achieve such a goal. But he still persisted, because he thought of a possibility. When he entered this hall, there was a mysterious force that swept through his body, and then the statue turned into his appearance and had all the means he had at that time. In that case, if he had a new method now, he might be able to kill the other party. However, he probably only had one chance because once he used that method, the other party would definitely be able to use it too. Early on, when he fought with Xue Hao, Lu Yi discovered a problem, and that was that with his current strength, it was very difficult to pose a threat to cultivators who were too much stronger than him. Take Xue Hao for example. At that time, he had used his divine nature to suppress his cultivation to the early Moon Jade realm, but the Mountain Pandao could only leave a few simple wounds on his body at most, and couldn't cause too much of an impact. In the end, if Li Shang hadn't started a soul battle and destroyed the other party's soul, Lu Yi wouldn't have been able to do anything to Xue Hao in that battle. Recently, Lu Yi had been thinking about how to solve this problem. It was impossible to change the Mountain Pandao, and the support of the Divine Blade Spirit Mark couldn't make the Mountain Pandao sharper. After thinking about it, he really did think of a way, but this idea hadn't been perfected. Until this time, when he fought with his other self, Lu Yi felt that it was time to give it a try. If it was possible, perhaps he could make the final decision. If not, then he would have to make other plans. His mind was calm and his eyes were clear. He raised the Mountain Pandao and blocked the other party's attack. They had fought for several days, and it was an intense battle with his other self. They already knew each other's strengths and weaknesses. It could be said that with a casual raise of a hand, the other party would know what would happen next. Taking advantage of the moment when his opponent withdrew the Mountain Pandao, Lu Yi suddenly grasped the hilt of the Mountain Pandao with both hands. This abnormal action clearly stunned his opponent, because up until now, Lu Yi had always wielded the Mountain Pandao with one hand. The sound of tides faintly rang out, but this time, there was no continuous flash of Mountain Pandao. Holding the Mountain Pandao with both hands, Lu Yi pressed forward and slashed at his opponent. The timing of this strike was extremely ingenious, and his opponent couldn't block it at all. However, when the Mountain Pandao landed, a Divine Guard spirit mark appeared on his body. The two of them had already clashed countless times like this over the past few days. When spear and shield clashed, they were basically evenly matched, and neither side could do anything to the other. But this time, it was clearly different. Not only did Lu Ye's expression become focused, but his opponent's expression also became serious. The Mountain Pandao slashed at the Divine Guard. Not only was the Mountain Pandao supported by the Mountain Pandao, but if one looked closely, they would see countless small and dense waves flowing rapidly. In an instant, the Mountain Pandao's blade seemed to have turned into a saw, and the small waves on the blade flowed even more ferociously. This was another use of the Mountain Pandao's 10,000 layered waves, and it was also a method that Lu Yi had been thinking about recently. His thinking was very simple. Since the Mountain Pandao's sharpness wasn't enough to threaten opponents with especially strong physical bodies, then he wouldn't use its sharpness to solve the problem, because it was too difficult. From another perspective, if the Mountain Pandao wasn't sharp enough, then it would be fine to cut it with a saw. A saw couldn't cut through any withered tree, but it could easily cut through it. This was the first time he had used it against an enemy, and he hadn't even tried it out yet. He couldn't say for sure how effective it would be. Thus, Lu Yi was also paying close attention to this attack. The effect was very obvious. The Divine Guard, which could have blocked the Mountain Pandao's Divine Blade, only lasted for an instant before shattering. The Mountain Pandao smoothly cut into the opponent's body, cutting through the shoulder blade and piercing through the internal organs. The scene froze, and the opponent froze in place, staring at Lu Yi with a surprised expression. Lu Yi gasped for breath. After several days of constant fighting, even he couldn't hold on any longer. Fortunately, this attack didn't let him down. "You win." The figure that looked exactly like Lu Yi suddenly spoke. Lu Yi jumped in fright. This was because he hadn't heard his opponent speak since the start of the battle. He had thought that his opponent was a manifestation of some kind of mysterious power, but he hadn't expected him to be able to speak. Being able to speak, didn't that mean his opponent was alive? However, not a single drop of blood flowed out of the wound. The cut made by the mountain pandao was smooth and clean, and it didn't look like it was made of flesh and blood. He instinctively wanted to pull his blade back, but he found that he couldn't. The opponent's cut body was squeezing the blade tightly. As his opponent swung his blade, Louis had no choice but to retreat. His expression was unsightly. This was the second time he had lost his blade recently. The first time was in that secret place, when the heaven-desired demonic spider had lost his mountain pandao. Fortunately, he had killed the heaven-desired demonic spider and recovered it. The figure was stabbed with the mountain pandao, but he didn't seem to be affected in the slightest. He just looked at Lu Yi with a faint smile. I wanted to spend the rest of my life in this damned place, but I didn't expect a young man like you to appear in this day and age. Since you've won, I can only abide by the ancient agreement. But kid, remember, don't ever lose your saber again. As soon as he finished speaking, a scene that shocked Lu Yi appeared. The mountain pandao that he had stabbed into his opponent's body quickly melted and was absorbed by the figure. Lu Yi raised his hand and howled, "My blade!" The mountain pandao had been with him ever since he started cultivating. He had wanted to find a piece of heavenly phoenix blue crystal to upgrade the mountain pandao into a magic treasure, but now that he hadn't found a heavenly phoenix blue crystal, the mountain pandao had actually melted. This figure, what the hell was he? Also, what did he mean by the ancient agreement? Although he was furious, Lu Yi didn't act rashly. He could feel that the figure's strength wasn't as simple as it seemed. What he had seen was probably only the tip of the iceberg. He tried to connect with the red talisman, but there was no response. Just as Lu Yi was thinking about what to do, the figure spoke again. "Kid, don't live too long. This old man has been in a deep sleep for too long. I just want to wake up as soon as possible." As he spoke, under Lu Ye's stunned gaze, his entire body began to rapidly melt away. End of chapter. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.